Hello again, everybody, and Merry Christmas from Claves Online and the Two-Man Game. I'm Bob Ramsey. That's Matt Rocchio, and we'll jump right into it, unless we go down a couple of rabbit holes, Rocc and I, as we are wont to do.
Yeah, that'll happen.
A little bit shortened show because St. Louis U isn't playing, and they're off until next week. The 30th is when they play, and so there are a number of things to catch up on. And while the Bills haven't played, and this is the old-timey guy thinking of terrestrial radio, which we are not, but thinking about the people we normally talk to, Billiken fans, and in the St. Louis U area, right on the border of Missouri and Illinois. And Matt, we didn't talk about this prior, but the bragging rights game with the Tigers and the Illini has come and gone, and it was pretty ugly for Missouri. There were some impressive things that came out of it about Illinois, still without perhaps their best guard. And I think a lot of people are convinced that the Illini are a legitimate Sweet 16 team and maybe better.
Yeah, they're incredible. The fact that somehow they slipped out of the AP is just a scathing indictment of that ranking system when you're talking about a team that's in the high teen or mid-teens, I should say, in Ken Pom. It's just ridiculous. They're an incredible team. They just have a collection of guards, and obviously they're still missing one. So, I mean, once Curbelo gets back, we're talking about, Curbelo and Plummer alongside, to go alongside with Kofi Cockburn. Earlier this week when we were on the radio with Frank Cusimano, you and him kind of batted around, how good is Kofi Cockburn? And I brought up Walker Kessler, and for a lot of SLU fans, you got a chance to see Walker Kessler, and you were both pretty definitive on who's going to win that matchup. Pro Kofi. I think that kind of says how skilled he is. It's not just his size; it's how skilled he really is. That even against a block shot master and a big player like Kessler, we're pretty confident he would be able to throughout the game get his where he wanted to. So Kofi Cockburn's a monster. You talk about the guard play on that team. They lost a little bit of size. They don't have the same kind of stretch four and big wings that they had last year with like Bashanis Veely. But nonetheless, when you have Cockburn, when you have people who can shoot like they can, you're going to make a run. And despite the fact the AP, whatever happened again this week or the past 2 weeks, I think they're going to be an Elite Eight team at worst. They're incredible. And I know it kind of fell by the wayside because they got beat up so badly, but shout out to Travion Brazil, who had 6 blocks as a freshman, which was and had some pretty impressive dunks as well, or not dunks, but pretty impressive finishes as well. And honestly, looked really good, moved well on the floor. There's not a lot of bright spots for Mizzou, but anytime we're talking about a freshman getting 6 blocks, you got to give ups for that and maybe, talk about a little bit of a bright side.
Yeah, I've had folks reaching out to me, really probably based on our radio conversations with our friend Frank Cusimano, talking about Cuonzo Martin and where does the program go next, and getting ready to start conference play. Still a lot of things can happen. I don't think there are anyone who has really expectations that Mizzou can really compete at the highest levels of the SEC. But remember, what's it going to take? Cuonzo himself mentioned it in the bragging rights post game. Go out and compete and work to get better. And do not be shocked. Do not be surprised when they knock off a couple of big wins along the way. And I think for that group, Cuonzo, his staff, that group of players, they show progress and steal a couple of wins away in the SEC. It's not necessarily the end of the world right now for Missouri. They got a lot of work to do, but I've been associated with teams that when things look really bleak, but you still got a couple of months to play, some really good things can still happen. And then of course, spring signings and transfer portals. Those are things that can still remake a program. So it was not fun for Missouri fans, but it's not necessarily the end of the world.
Yeah, and I think that, it's a lot of doom and gloom and a lot of, let's kick Cuonzo out as soon as possible, and the $6 million buyout that it'll still be if they were to fire him later on this season. I like that you're finding ways to give some positivity. The guard play is interesting. There's not a lot of size on this team, unfortunately. Kobe Brown's having some big games. Anytime you put up 24-point games, and there's not a lot around you, and it's against, not completely just like useless competition, that's not nothing. And so Kobe Brown's been playing pretty well. And so, but the issue is that Konzo hasn't recruited to the level that people expected. Let's just take really quickly talking about Mizzou. Let's just take the football team kind of paradox that's going on right now. You have an incredible recruiter who's not getting it done X's and O's wise on the field. And people are wondering, is his coaching good enough despite how good his recruiting is? And I think people would argue that, basketball, handicapping it a little bit is probably a little bit more weighted to the importance of recruiting than coaching. But nonetheless, Konzo hasn't recruited well since his first couple of years. And no one's really that impressed with the X's and O's offensively. The defensive one's always pretty solid. But the games aren't necessarily attractive games to watch, even when they do win. And so there's a lot of reasons why people doubt the future, going forward. And, as we get further on in the contract, the buyout gets lower, and the ability for Mizzou to fire him and move on without so much of a financial burden is more readily available. But it's clear that people are at kind of a point where they're sick of it and they want to change. But I like that there is a positive bent and that we're finding things, and Mizzou's playing up to a point where there are little things to take away. Yeah, it's 220, it's a 30-point, 40-point loss to KU plus, and then a bad loss to Illinois. It's bad. I'm not saying they shouldn't move on from Konzo. I am saying that there are some positives to look at down in Columbia nonetheless.
Yeah, and trying to watch games over the last few days as we go along, the most impressive thing I've seen is Scottie Pippen Jr.
How about that?
Watched the Vanderbilt game and over BYU in Hawaii, and it was a great game, back and forth the entire game. And then at the end, all of a sudden, a tremendous burst from Pippen Jr., and he had 4 or 5, maybe 6 possessions at the end of the game when it mattered that he could not be contained. It was really fun to see. And, Vanderbilt, not a lot of high hopes in the SEC as well, but here's a guy that makes you stand up and take notice. And those are the things that at this time of the year, as teams are wrapping up all their non-conference stuff, that you look for little things to keep an eye on moving forward.
Yeah, I like that. Scottie Pippen, he's always been a really active player. He obviously doesn't have the same, size as his dad did, but he has the same kind of all-around game that his dad did in a lot of ways. And so he's a really interesting player, and I like the fact that he's able to jump up and score like that. We're talking a little bit about Hawaii. I think it is kind of incredible. The story is it Memphis, who's stuck right now on Oahu with no game to play. And those poor guys.
Memphis football, right?
Memphis football, yeah. Not basketball, obviously. Memphis football. I know we were talking about Hawaii. I just had to jump to that really quickly because we were talking about it.
How crappy is that? You take
poor guys.
It's not taking 50 people for basketball, 50-seat plane. You're taking 100 people or more, and you get all the way over there, then they cancel. The virus, it's almost impossible to predict, right? But man, you think you'd have a handle on of saying, boy, this is getting out of hand, Memphis. You probably need to stay home. Or, hey, we feel good now. And then all of a sudden, once they get there, it really stinks, which leads us to the next topic of COVID protocol. And all the leagues, not all the leagues, but many of the top basketball conferences are revamping, reevaluating, readdressing their COVID protocols and their forfeiture / postponement policies. Really interesting that it appears everybody's making an all-out effort not to have a shutdown gap like we had last year.
Mm-hmm. I like that they're changing things up. I like they're trying to be proactive, getting ahead of things right now in December instead of being behind the eight ball, in January. At the same time, that's necessary because if you look at the things we're coming out about Omicron, it looks like it might just be a really, really bad but quick spike. So I know the A10 kind of decided on their forfeiture rules. I think if you have enough people to play, even if it's a low number, I think you should go ahead and play the game. But I don't think you should, especially now when we're seeing that despite the fact that vaccination boosting keeps you safe from the virus, having a debilitating effect on you, you're still going to pop positive, and people are then going to need to be careful. As that goes forward, we can't hold it against teams for popping a lot of positives because vaccinations boosters clearly isn't going to stop that. So forfeiting the actual games, I think, is a bad idea. I think going forward and trying to figure out rescheduling and those kind of things as much as you can makes sense. But I don't think at any point we should come down to a situation where a team with a lot of positives gets penalized for that, because clearly right now there's no way to actively stop that. Even if we're talking about, people masking up in other situations, people washing their hands, wiping down surfaces, nothing's proven to stop the spread of this. But hopefully you can be smart about it, take care of the kids when they do pop positive. No one gets, really, really sick. And, at this point, we have to put aside the fact that we love sports, we want to be played, and just be practical about those facts.
Now, I disagree. Sports is everything.
Look at his shirt.
I'm saying it tongue in cheek, but I think there is a reasonable position, and I don't want to speak for our friend Bob Costas, who was interviewed. I read excerpts from the interview. I believe it was on CNN. You can fact check me on that, but he was just interviewed. And I'd mentioned this the other day, got a little bit of pushback, but I sort of hedged because I didn't want to become an enemy of the people. But there is a theory that you're talking about young people in peak physical condition, that if you're asymptomatic, go ahead and play. You mentioned the concentric rings of people around athletes in a game, courtside,
yes,
concessions, all those other things. Having said that, can precautions be taken for the non-participants? Do you create more of a bubble and let asymptomatic players play, whether it's hockey, the NBA, college basketball, whatever? I don't know the answer, but I think it is a reasonable position to take for people of that age and of that physical condition. I think it's reasonable. And then you say, well, what if so-so? Well, if there's an underlying condition, then that player doesn't play. See, what so many people want is they want a blanket policy for everything. And if possible, if one person can't do it, then nobody should be allowed to do it. And I think that's the wrong direction to go. If we're on a team, if you and I are on a team, and I'm asymptomatic, but have been around people, or maybe even a positive test, but zero symptoms, and you have a condition that makes you a little more concerned about the ability to play, why should I not play and you not play? What about remove you from the equation to take care of your health, not as a punishment, but to take care of you?
Yeah.
And I think I am open to the conversation. I am just trying to present another look. And I'm not trying to convince anybody. I'm just saying we can go off into other avenues about keeping schools open and all these different things. But I think I think society, and as a microcosm of society, athletics might lead the way in that kind of thinking.
Okay, and I guess I think the natural question there is, should athletics be the thing leading that conversation?
Well,
It might just be inevitable, but is that
well, let's talk about just two quick conversations where athletics led the way, breaking the color barrier in professional sports. And then more recently, the red flag of COVID in the NBA.
Yeah.
So there's one old time and one, almost as fresh as today's headlines, but really we were ushered into the harsh reality of the COVID era thanks to the NBA. Now, we would have gotten there anyway, as people would have been getting sick all over the place, but the NBA sent up the red flag, right?
Yeah, and to that point, talking about the NBA setting up a red flag, the NBA right now, it might have been finalized. I can double check that, but they were batting around the idea of increasing the testing overall. And the fact of the matter is, like I was just talking about earlier, to the fault of no one, that's not going to get them the result I think they're going for. That's just going to mean more positives.
Yeah.
I mean, none of these guys aren't going to be getting, seriously ill. And again, people can have a conversation about whether or not
at all.
Exactly. And so I understand people coming from the point of, why are we doing anything if they're not going to be seriously ill? Why not treat it like the cold and flu? But then again, that gets into the other conversation, which is, well, before this all, we were treating the cold and flu probably incorrectly overall. And that's kind of been something you and I have touched on in different mediums on this podcast and on the radio. And so that's kind of the, fork in the road I get to in this part of the discussion.
Yeah.
But overall, I think the NBA's decision right now, and we've kind of moved from the college forfeiture rules, which I think we're both pretty clear on. We're both pretty lockstep on the fact that because of the testing policies, forfeiture and penalizing a team, that has 5 positives as opposed to the team that has 3 is a ridiculous way to do it. But moving to the NBA one, just upping the amount of tests is just going to mean more positives. And I don't know if that's 100% how this is going to be, the eventual solve down the road. And again, I think the bigger problem is we're analyzing this in week 2 of what's going to be a 5-week flurry. And flurry is a bad word. Blizzard, snow, storm. It's that's what the numbers coming out of South Africa are saying. It's going to get really bad, but but then things are going to come back down at that 5-6 week peak, and we're in like week 2. And so are all these changes maybe going to reflect something better post-January? I'm not sure. We're going to have to see about that. Unfortunately, that's kind of been the approach for the last 2 years, which is wait and see, both from, pretty much everyone. And that's probably why we're, entering year 2.
Well, yeah, I really think
not to be too negative about it or anything.
I really think leagues are going to be, and let's say the enormous state university Rockios have a game to play in Las Vegas against St. Louis University, and you have one player who's tested positive the day you're getting ready to leave to go to your game against the Ramsey Wesleyan team. And so you're not going to go because close contact, right? Your positive guy's been practicing, right? You're going to cancel the game. My suggestion is, if you have coaches on your team that are over 55, 60 years old and not vaccinated, well, first of all, everybody should be in your organization. Your entire athletic department should be completely vaxxed. That's my opinion.
Because our entire premise here is that the majority of these people outside of those coaches 65 and older are not going to get seriously ill should they catch it.
And so
the majority of them.
Let's say you have a 62. Let's say you have a Larry Brown type guru on your bench, okay? Because you're the dynamic face coach of the program, but you need somebody who can really coach, because we know, Rocc, you really can't. So you need that guy, but he's 70 years old. So he's completely vaccinated. Does he want to get on the plane with the team and go to Vegas and play that game? Well, shouldn't that be his choice?
Yeah, it should
shouldn't
be.
he get to decide? And if
Yeah.
and if he decides not to, not only do we respect that, we applaud it. He's got to take care of himself, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why earlier, you like 5 minutes ago, you meant, the word bubble came up, and that's something that I think is reasonable to wonder, because again, the thought process has to include the security guard who has diabetes, or the
ushers. When I'm sitting
the
close,
usher. Yeah, the usher who has Crohn's disease, that's immunocompromised. So like those people have to be considered when we're talking about this. So it's not just 25-year-old athletes or 40-year-old coaches.
So what's your consideration for the guy with Crohn's disease sitting right behind me, behind the scorer's table? What's your consideration? You let him know the situation and let him make a decision, right?
Yeah.
Rather than say, yeah, he's got Crohn's disease, we're going to shut down the program. How does that make sense? How does that make sense? Either way, he's not getting a paycheck. So it's you're not hurting him. And you're not helping him by that guy's got to make the decision, or that lady, or that person working the concession stand.
Yeah.
And you got to respect those decisions.
Yeah, and there are, other variables to that. If I'm not sure the situation of these people. If you don't want to work in a stadium because they're not putting in those protocols, how does that affect your ability to claim unemployment and things like that? And like that's, I think those are real world issues. That again, that's minutia, and maybe is it ridiculous for me to be bringing that up? I don't know, but nonetheless, that's where my mind goes when I have this discussion.
Yeah, but I do think it comes down to some important personal decision making. If I don't go, like me personally, and please do not use me as a litmus test.
You've been very consistent for almost 2 whole years now. But 75% of this is personal decisions, and whether or not you're going to choose to put yourself potentially at risk and weigh those decisions for yourself on a personal level. And you've been very consistent about that the entire run of COVID for 2 years.
And I don't want anyone to take my personal foolishness as some sort of a guide. Please, no one on either side of the issue use me for anything other than some sort of lame entertainment value. Beyond that, no. But if it's a situation where I go, man, there's a ton of people. I'll give you a perfect example. My wife and I used it the other day. One of my very best friends was having a Christmas party at a public spot at a bar. And I've been into them before a few years ago, and it's wall-to-wall people, wall-to-wall. Masks or not, that was not a situation I wanted to put myself in. So shut down the party because Bob Ramsey is uncomfortable? No, do whatever you want. But I personally don't feel that would be in my best health interests to be there. So we didn't go. Why is it so hard?
And that was another classic two-man game debate where we pretty much didn't really disagree, but we said the same thing for 15 minutes.
So let's go to the pro game. And I got to tell you, it's no surprise, but I never want to take Steph Curry for granted. That would be the biggest mistake of all, to take the best shooter in the history of the game for granted. So every time he does remarkable stuff, I think it's important to talk about it.
Yeah, he's incredible. I mean, and you get to watch him tomorrow on Christmas. Fingers crossed nothing goes wrong there. And obviously last night he put up 46 against the Grizzlies, hometown Grizzlies, obviously. He's incredible. His ability to pull up from anywhere. Again, Mike Claiborne mentioned it, and I think people really need to understand why Mike mentioned the fact that Steph Curry might be the most well-conditioned athlete
Great
in
point.
the NBA. His ability to run, it is unbelievable. And you saw it. I think he got at least 5 or 6 of his 14 threes coming off screens, running in transition, getting out in front. And then from there, his ability to go 12 of 12 from the line and things like that is just classic Steph Curry. But this is why you say you don't want to take for granted getting to watch him. You're going to get to watch him for a while because, 6-7 years from now when he's, borderline 40, he's going to be able to transition to just an insane off-ball game because he's still going to be a well-conditioned athlete, and the shooting is not going to go away. So take away the circus layups, the incredible dribbling, and a lot of them maybe move, on the move passing and off the ball dribbling. And you're still left with the best off-ball shooter in the NBA, if not basketball history, who's already conditioned and knows how to use screens correctly. He's incredible. So you get to, he's got 3 or 4 years left of what he's doing right now, I think, if not more. So take advantage, obviously, to watch that on Christmas because even when that part goes away, we're going to have more years. But it's just he's an absolute treat.
Yeah. I'm glad you guys brought up conditioning. And then there's also strength. While he doesn't look like a muscle man, like a linebacker, he's continued to work on his strength that allows him to get the ridiculous distance without having to launch a ball. Like if you and I get 35 feet away, we got to get a running start and throw it. But when you've got the leg strength and conditioning that even in the 47th minute of the game, you can just jump up and you're not having to your arms are strong enough that it's just the same motion, whether you're 12 feet out or 40 feet out. And that strength, conditioning, and work ethic and all the things that are great about basketball specifically and athletics generally is all in Steph Curry personified.
One perfect example of that is just do a quick Google search. Just Google search Steph Curry, Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, obviously the defensive end for the Cleveland Browns. Garrett was at a Warriors game and they were talking courtside. And Myles Garrett, who's listed at 6'4", 275, does not look that much bigger than Steph Curry at all. And it was one of those things where, oh yeah, basketball players are huge, but Steph Curry is built, especially his lower body. He might have the best lower body in the league, and that's why people always talk about him as a shooter. I've always made a point to mention his ability to finish because he's so strong. He's always talked about personal record, setting PRs in squats and things like that. He's so strong. That's what it allows him to finish consistently the way he does inside. People have never really given him the credit as a finisher, but half of it that's a huge part of his game, and it's a reason why the shooting is obviously always there. He's an incredible shooter all world, obviously, but teams could hedge and double him differently if he wasn't such a consistently good finisher. Even if they do just leave a guy, on the drop, just sitting in the paint, he'll finish, under and over him every time.
What else we got? What other headlines or games are piquing your interest?
Well, this I had to bring this up from last night. Fellow Claibs Online podcast host Joe Rocc, obviously host of what are they? Him and Claibs do lunch together. Obviously, lunch with Joe and Claibs.
And Weekend Joe,
I think is actually, and then Weekend Joe.
And baseball with me, our daily cards
baseball with
during
you.
the summer.
God, he has so many. I was gonna forget some. But he texted. I saw him commenting on this, and he texted me this morning. We were texting about this morning. So last night, the Lakers did a kind of a farewell ceremony. Gary Payton and some other Laker greats were there because they were saying goodbye to the Staples Center. They're not leaving the arena. It's just that the naming rights for Staples ran out, and now it's going to be called some dumb cryptocurrency.com BS. And so they did some huge thing, like when the Eagles blew up the link or something like that, and they tried to make it seem like, well, this is gone, and it was just the naming rights. I agree with Joe. He didn't even have to prompt me. to talk about how dumb this is. This was dumb as hell, and it just icing on the cake, just like mwah, just beautiful. They get trounced by 28 by the Spurs. Just everything about it was just so perfect and dumb, and that's kind of really just the essence of the Lakers season so far.
I do have you'll be shocked to know that I have a philosophy on that topic. Naming rights philosophy.
Wait. Would anyone describe it as old man?
No.
Wow,
cynical,
okay.
Maybe cynical guy.
Okay.
My philosophy is I'm all for
young
naming
and cynical,
rights.
that's fine.
It's great. But unless you're paying me, I don't have to call it that. Right?
Okay, fair enough.
I call it Busch Stadium. I love Busch Bavarian beer, the best popular price beer in America. Come to our St. Louis brewery and we'll prove it. I love Busch. I love Budweiser.
When was the last time they signed a check for you that you still know that slogan off the top of your head? Good
Head
Lord.
for the mountains of Busch.
Oh my God.
Budweiser, the clean, crisp taste of Budweiser. And brought to you, of course, by Bud Light.
Somewhere on the CV is, of course,
Busch
Cardinals
Light,
Broadcasting.
Anheuser-Busch Natural Light, and the fine family of Michelob beers. But my point is,
we're gonna have to have you and Claves do a read off one of these days.
Oh, it'd be great. So, no, my point on that is call it whatever you want, but in most stadiums are in the old days are named after families or memorial this or Wrigley for the Wrigley family. It really wasn't named after chewing gum. It was the owners of the Cubs, but they could be whatever they want to be. It's still going to be Wrigley Field, right?
Yeah.
Right. Third incarnation of Busch. It was Sportsman's Park, then the first Busch Stadium, now the second Busch Stadium. It's Busch Stadium. In St. Louis, it was Kiel Center. In my mind, it's still always Kiel. Now, I really respect the Enterprise folks, so I don't mind calling it Enterprise, even though they don't strictly pay me. But I really respect what they've done in the community and what they've done in the sports community. I'm a sports advocate, right? So Enterprise is okay with me, but if their deal ran out and it became,
it's just different. It's just the owner's getting a different check. Who cares?
Yes. Why
do we have to pull Gary Payton from watching, GP2 play with, play and
right.
Why we got to waste time with this? This is pointless. I hate it. It was dumb. It was over. That too. It was overwrought. It was classic Lakers. And then again, they lost to a bad team in the Spurs. This is the stat I pulled from the game that I had to get out. Keita Bates-Diop. You've heard of him. We all know him. Obviously, we all know the highlight reel of Keita Bates-Diop. He had 30 points and a perfect day from the field. That was 5% of his total points in his career scored.
Stat of the day. Well done.
Stat of the day. Keita Bates-Diop last night against the Lakers scored 5% of his career total points. He's in his 5th year in the NBA. He has 15 total double-digit games in his career, and he scored 30 last night. His scoring average for the season went from 3.8 to 4.9 last night. It was bad. The Lakers are bad, and they should feel bad about it. Tonight they're playing the Nets. James Harden's back. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, shocker, will not be there with the Lakers, so the Lakers might actually have a chance. LeBron James and Russell Westbrook last night scored 66 of their 110, and they lost by 28.
Wow.
The bench is terrible. Even with Anthony Davis, they weren't winning a lot. It's a problem in Los Angeles, and right now their response to injuries and COVID is Darren Collison and Wesley Johnson.
Well, what's happened to Anthony Davis? What's happened to Davis?
I have no idea. I obviously now he's out, but I have to think there was a nagging injury. But I also he just lost that killer instinct. I mean from the day they traded for him, and they didn't immediately put him at the 5 for the majority of the game, and they kept playing him at the 4, and he kept being adamant that he is a 4. And then they would invariably destroy teams, both offensively and defensively, when he played the 5, but they still wouldn't. And, I hate this. I hate doing the whole, well, he's not tough and he doesn't have a love for the game. But unfortunately, with guys like Anthony Davis and guys like Ben Simmons, it's hard for me to come to a different conclusion, because we know they have all the talent in the world. Because when we've seen them play motivated, they have torn the league to shreds single-handedly. And so to watch Anthony Davis, pulling up from 15 feet against 6'5" guards who are guarding him, it's inexplicable. And him not being a dominant shot blocker throughout the entire game at the center position is inexplicable. And again, I brought in Ben Simmons because him not playing basketball when he's healthy, and everyone Joe Johnson is back making a bucket in the NBA, and Ben Simmons doesn't want to play basketball. It's hard for me to get past what I usually refer to as overly surface thinking of toughness and passion. But the skills there, the talent's there, and the age isn't affecting them yet. Davis, maybe it is injuries. With him, that's more of a factor. He falls down 80 times a game when he actually is playing. So maybe that's what it is. But he has the talent, but he doesn't have the drive right now.
Other than opening presents and overeating, what are you looking forward to in the NBA this weekend?
Giannis Antetokounmpo is out of the protocols and looks like he's going to play tomorrow against the Celtics. That would be awesome. Obviously, anytime you get to see Giannis, that's going to be fun. He's going to decide tomorrow. He's going to get out on the court. He's going to get out on the court tonight, I should say, on Christmas Eve. Do a little work and see if he's going to be ready. So you should sort of know tonight if that's going to be a good one. Celtics, obviously, anytime you can watch Jason Tatum, it's going to be a good time here in St. Louis. Hopefully they can figure something out at the trade deadline, because as much as I love Jason Tatum, I think it's becoming clear that he's not LeBron James with the ball in his hand as a passer, and expecting him to be consistently throughout a game it's just not gonna lead to a cohesively fluid offense. And so they got to figure something out there in Boston. But Tatum's having a big season. It's not his fault they're losing. He can play well every night, but it's just not his game. And it if he can score, he can play defense, he can shoot from deep, he can score inside. I'm completely okay with saying that passing isn't going to be a huge part of his game, and saying that the Celtics need to be aware of that and build alongside it instead of just trying to drag it along. And then Suns and Warriors. That's the big one you're going to want to watch. Obviously, Mavs and Jazz can be fun, but my thoughts on both those teams. I've been very adamant about both of them.
Yeah, Utah
Warriors and yes, they do. Their offense is also unbelievable. I can't figure it out. It's ridiculous how much they're scoring. At the same time, they let a Timberwolves team with nobody, like absolutely nobody. Jaden McDaniels, Jake Layman, Naz Reid, D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, and then a bunch of other people you probably haven't heard of on the bench, scored 116 points against the Jazz. Again, their offense is otherworldly this year, but my big thing has always been, can the defense play well in the postseason? And they're letting up that kind of score, I know, in a regular season game against a bad Timberwolves team. That's weird. Again, we'll talk a lot about the Jazz in the playoffs, because that's when they could actually prove me wrong, and I'll happily admit it. Warriors and Sun, that's the big shiny box. You shook it a couple times, it rattled around, it made a good sound, and it just keeps getting better because Devin Booker's back. So here's the fun thing. We talked earlier on in the season about the Suns' winning streak. Well, Devin Booker got hurt. That winning streak went down. Devin Booker came back. They've won 3 straight, which means that Devin Booker is on a 20-game winning streak. So Devin Booker is going to go for his 21st straight win personally, and I like this. Through those first 17 wins, he averaged 23, 5, and 4 on a 47, 42, and 86 line. Very good, very impressive. But here's the big thing. He goes out for COVID, and in the 3 games since he's come back, like obviously a couple of them have been against some good teams, he's averaging 23. He's upped his rebounds from 5 to 7. He's upped his assists from 4 to 6. and the last 3 games he's shooting a 48 clip from the field, 54 from 3, and he's been perfect so far from the line. And so if Devin Booker can come back from COVID like this and up his game more than what we saw, especially as a 3-point shooter, the sky is the absolute limit for the Suns. There's no reason, with the way Mikal Bridges is playing, with the way that Chris Paul is still playing, despite working through Christmas now of his 17th season, and with the way that Devin Booker has been playing before and now coming back, there's no reason the Suns aren't your favorite overall, I think, still in the West. Although, obviously, tonight or tomorrow night on Christmas, if the Warriors beat them, I have no problem with people saying they're better. Klay Thompson coming back after Christmas. It looks like it's going to be more around New Year's. They thought it might be closer to Christmas, but that's kind of changed over the last 10 days, 2 weeks or so. I think the Suns are my number 1 in the West, even with what Steph Curry's doing, even with Klay Thompson returning. I just think right now the Suns still have some climbing to do. Whereas even with Klay Thompson back, I think we know what the Warriors are. They're an incredible team. They're going to light the world on fire. It's going to be a battle of 1 and 2. The Lakers aren't going to matter. The Mavs aren't going to matter. Even if the Nuggets, who I love, Nikola Jokic last night, 29, 21, 5 against the Hornets. Look up the highlights. It was freaking beautiful. Even the Nuggets, if they were entirely healthy, give them Jamal Murray, give them Michael Porter Jr., it doesn't matter. It is a 2-team race in the West. It's the Suns and the Warriors, and you can see them battle it out. Put whoever you want at number 1 after tomorrow night. I don't care. For the rest of the season, it's going to be an absolute battle in the West. And then in the East, I don't really know. Everyone's hurt or in COVID protocols. Like the Heat without Bam and Butler, I have no idea what they are. The Bulls haven't played a full roster in 3 weeks. The Nets, again, with Kyrie, I can't believe that whole situation developed the way it had with him coming back. The East it's not bad the way it was for a solid 15 years there. But, again, just looks like another season where the favorite in the NBA Finals is going to come out of the West.
Matt Rocchio, we're out of time. I'm going to go to Christmas Eve Mass. And so I got to get going. We'll regroup the first of the week, talk about the NBA weekend, catch up on college basketball, and finally get to preview a Billiken game as they'll open Atlantic 10 basketball next week at UMass. For Matt Rocchio, I'm Bob Ramsey. Merry Christmas, everybody.